Welcome to Golden Games. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and ring the bell so you can stay updated with all the latest notifications. Today, we'll dive into the PS5 UMTX Jailbreak by SocracticBliss, one of the most talked about topics in the jailbreak world right now. We'll break down what's happening with this jailbreak, how it impacts the community, and what you need to know. Let's get started. PS5 UMTX Jailbreak by SocracticBliss. This repo contains a WebKit ROP exploit of the UMTX race use after free CV 2024-43102 vulnerability reported by SocracticBliss. It's basically a port of fail0 verflows and flatz exploit strategy. It abuses the UEF to get a read-write mapping into a kernel thread stack and leverages pipe reads and writes to establish an arbitrary read-write primitive in the kernel. This read-write is then escalated to a better one that leverages an IPv6 socket pair and pipe pair for stable read-write that can be passed to payloads in the same manner that was possible with the previous IPv6 PS5 kernel exploit. Ultimately, a payload loader will be launched to listen for payload ELFs on port 9021. I recommend the PS5 Payload Dev SDK, as it should have full compatibility with this loader when kernel offsets are added. This vulnerability impacts 1.00 firmware to 7.61 firmware. However, FW 3.00 seem to have additional mitigations that require tweaking of the exploit to work. This exploit doesn't support FW 3.00 as of yet. Furthermore, the WebKit vulnerability that we chain with was patched in 6.00, so another WebKit exploit that achieves userland read-write will be required for these systems. Again, on higher firmwares, this is left uncompleted right now. For FW 3.00, all that should be required is gadget offsets. The following firmwares are currently supported: 2.00, 2.20, 2.25, 2.26, 2.30, 2.50. Currently included: obtains arbitrary kernel read/write, enables debug settings menu. Note: you will have to fully exit settings and go back in to see it. Gets root privileges and breaks out of sandbox jail. Runs John Tornblom's ELF loader on port 9021 for payloads to execute. Limitations: this exploit achieves read/write, but not code execution. This is because we cannot currently dump kernel code for gadgets, as kernel.txt pages are marked as execute-only memory, XORM. Attempting to read kernel.txt pointers will panic. As per the above plus the hypervisor, HV, enforcing kernel write protection, this exploit also cannot install any patches or hooks into kernel space. Clang-based fine-grained control flow integrity, CFI, is present and enforced. Supervisor mode access prevention execution, SMAP SMEP, cannot be disabled due to the HV. FW 6.00 requires new WebKit exploit and is thus not supported. FW 3.00 requires strategy adjustments to exploit UAF. Exploit strategy notes: initial double free. The strategy for this exploit largely comes from fail0 verflow and flatz. Upon exploiting, it essentially gives us a double free. We can use this to overlap the object of a kernel stack without even map mapping to get a window into a kernel thread stack. This very powerful capability lets us read-write to arbitrary kernel pointers on the stack, giving ASLR defeat and the ability to create primitives. The thread which we have access to its stack will call the victim thread, getting arbitrary read-write. By creating a pipe and filling up the pipe buffer on the main thread, then trying to write to it using the victim thread, the victim thread will block waiting for space to clear up in the buffer. During this time, we can use our window into the kernel stack to change the IOVEC pointers to kernel pointers and set flags to get them treated as kernel addresses. By then reading the pipe on the main thread, we can get kernel arbitrary read. Similarly, by getting the victim thread to read on the pipe, it will block waiting for incoming data. We can then, again, overwrite the IOVEC pointers and make them kernel pointers, and write data on the main thread to get kernel arbitrary write. Upgrading arbitrary read-write. By this stage, We have an arbitrary read write with no real constraints, but we're tied to using multi-threading and blocking for it to work, which isn't ideal. We then use the r/w to iterate the process FD table and overlap the tops of two IPv6 sockets. We can then create another arbitrary read-write via the IPv6_tinfo sockopt. This read-write primitive again isn't ideal, though, as it's constrained in size and contents due to the underlying socket option. We keep this step mostly to emulate the scenario of the IPv6 exploit, which most payloads and such were built on. We can get a better read-write via pipes. By again iterating the process FD table and modifying pipe map buffer objects, we can establish read-write. The IPv6 socket pair is used as a mechanism to control the pipe map buffer, fixing sidestepping corruption. If we leave things as is and attempt to close the browser, the system will crash. This is because the process cleanup will try to free the kernel stack which has already been freed. To avoid this, we do two things. Intentionally leak the ref count on the SHM-FD we use for the initial double free so that it isn't freed upon process exit. Zero the victim threads td_stack in the process thread list. Stability notes. On FW 3.00, this exploit is very stable. The only critical point of failure is failing to overlap the objects. On higher firmwares, this overlap is harder to achieve due to alleged mitigations at the page heap allocator level. 2XX Jailbreak is released and need AdaHen stuff to play games. 3XX/5XX will be implemented soon, and after that they need AdaHen/stuff too. 6XX/7XX probably not going to work with WebKit and needed B2JB method, but they also need AdaHen stuff too. Credit shouts: Fail Zero Verflow, Flatz, ChendoChap, SlidyBat, psfree, idlesauce, Znullptr, zecoxao, SocracticBliss, and John Tornblom. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss any of my future uploads. It really helps the channel grow, and I appreciate all of your support. Also, feel free to share this video with your friends. I'm sure they'd enjoy it too. Let's keep spreading the love and building this amazing community together. Until next time, stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next video.